Okay, welcome. This is the video in which I read through Chris Golde's article, Preparing Stewards of the Discipline. Um, it's the first time I've ever done a read through video, so I'm really curious to see how it goes, and I hope it's helpful for you. But I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about, just before I get into the reading itself, is a little bit of an explanation about why we set this reading, which I don't think I quite fully covered in the primer the primer video for this video. So Jack and I discovered this document, this article, about 2017, early 2017. I can still remember we were driving in the car together from the Kingswood campus back to the Parramatta campus. We just had a meeting about thinking about like what's the purpose of what we're doing here in the Master of Research. And I think I'd just been Googling for stuff and came across this article, and I can remember I read it out loud to Jack in the car, and I remember being really struck by how powerful the sentiment of the article is, that it as a way of helping us to think about why we're doing research training and how we can help you guys, help students, not just learn the things of your discipline, but have a sense of the purpose, the telos, the end, for why you are doing this, like what its kind of bigger meaning is. Now that might seem kind of lofty and perhaps idealistic, or it might even seem like it's something that's like distracting or separate to your studies and to your training as a researcher. But one of the things that we want to contend to you is that the work of research is very difficult, very, very difficult. Like by definition, if you're a researcher, you're right up against the edge of knowledge, dealing with very complex material. And by virtue of being in a program like a master's program, like you're amongst the few people in the world who know with any depth your subject matter. It might not feel that way to you at the moment, but that's how it is. And all of this work can become very difficult for us. It can weigh us down. It can be very isolating as a researcher. Masters and PhD candidates report very high rates of loneliness and of feeling kind of like they have a very heavy workload and not having a sense of why they're doing things. And for us, this document and the sentiment, more than the document itself, it's the sentiment that Golde expresses, is a really vital intervention that helps us as researchers think about why we're doing this. One of the things we know from research is that if we can have a sense of our own internal motivation, what's called intrinsic motivation, rather than extrinsic motivation for doing things, then we tend to get along with whatever it is that we have to do better. So when Jack and I first read this document, we realized that in just, as you can see there on the left, in just 3 short pages, it's not even 3 really, it's kind of 2 pages stretched over into 3. In just 2 stretched pages, Golde is able to articulate a way of thinking about research and the purpose of training up to be a researcher in a field of research. So, I guess without further ado, let's head on over and start reading Golde's little primer article, Preparing Stewards of the Discipline. So published 2006, and I'll just jump straight into the abstract, which is a really short little abstract. To direct attention to the expectations for leadership, integrity, and responsibility of the doctorate, the author argues for the creation of a ritual ceremony of initiation for students entering doctoral education. That's kind of weird. I remember thinking that was really odd when I first read it. A little bit confronting, like, we're going to get people to do an initiation ceremony when they start a doctorate, but okay, like whatever. And obviously just thinking about language for a second, the way that abstract is constructed linguistically, you've got the first clause of the sentence, to direct attention, all the way through to responsibility of the doctorate. linguistically, the way that works is because of this first clause, therefore the second clause. So because, in order to direct attention, the author argues with the active verb in the sentence and being to argue, and the author being the subject. So if we take the abstract seriously, we come away with the sense that Chris Golde is arguing that we set up some kind of ritual initiation to give doctoral students a way of paying attention to issues of leadership, integrity and responsibility as they go through the doctoral degree. All right, let's get into it. In the first week of medical school, I had an initiation in front of family and friends that symbolises entry into the profession. All new students receive a white laboratory coat, the standard uniform of a physician. In addition, they recite an oath committing themselves to the profession and its ethics, a powerful statement of shared values and purpose of being a doctor. This white coat ceremony signals the beginning of the rigorous educational period that will eventually culminate in the conferral of the title Doctor. In this ritual moment, that moment being given the white coat and reciting the oath, in this ritual moment, students shed old identities and begin to adopt the identity of physician that embodies new values, skills, and knowledge. The ceremony is a tangible touchstone. Tangible touchstone is an obvious, a strange kind of combination. Tangible means touchable, and touchstone means kind of thing that you touch. But anyway, a touchable thing that you touch. The ceremony is a tangible touchstone reminding students throughout the many challenges they will face in their training of what it means to be a medical doctor. Now this is a kind of a little vignette that Golde begins with. She's kind of setting the scene here. But at that last sentence, I think is really important, of what it means to be a medical doctor. And that's why we've set the reading here is to start you thinking about, like, what does it mean to be a researcher? Well, obviously it means that you're going to be finding things out, like, sure. But what does it mean to you personally? What does it mean to others in your field of research or your discipline? What does it mean more broadly in society? Meaning is a very difficult thing for us to quantify, and it's a very subjective element of human experience and of intersubjective communal experience. But it's a very important thing. Without meaning, human beings struggle to thrive. And so we set this reading to begin you thinking about the meaning of what it is that you're doing. Because if you can derive some meaning, if you can get some sense of meaning of why you're doing this degree, the Master of Research, or whichever master's program you're enrolled in, if you can get some meaning, you are much more likely to be able to thrive through the degree in a way that keeps you happy and healthy and as a good contributor to the community around you. That's a pretty high ideal that we're shooting for, but we think it's incumbent upon us as the people who run the program to try and find strategies that help you do things like find meaning in the work that you're doing. Working a meaningless job is awful. Having meaningless study to do can be awful. And so finding the meaning in your work, vital. Let's continue. The 40,000 individuals earning PhDs, that's a hell of a lot of people. The 40,000 individuals earning PhDs each year in the United States also assume the title doctor, and the educational process of becoming a historian, a chemist, a mathematician, or a political scientist can be just as daunting and challenging as that of becoming a physician. Yet no equivalent ceremony of initiation exists for those entering doctoral study, nor is there an oath or statement of shared purpose. Now, if what I said before is to be taken seriously, that must mean that for people doing PhDs, there's a kind of a problem of meaning. In the last sentence of the first paragraph, Golde claims that the purpose of the ceremony is to remind students throughout the many challenges that they'll face of what it means to be a doctor. And Golde's contention here is that in PhD programs and their equivalents, like Master of Research, or cognate, I suppose, rather than equivalent, like Master of Research programs, where we don't have such ceremonies or such kind of ritual kind of acts of thinking, then people are going to not have a sense of what it means to be a PhD doctor or a master. That strikes me as potentially problematic. We ought to be looking to set people up to think about meaning, which is why we're doing this reading. Let's scroll down a bit. Those of us at the Carnegie Foundation, this is where Golde worked at the time she wrote this document, who have examined doctoral education over the past 5 years, think there should be. That is, they think there should be an oath or statement of shared purpose. We maintain that the purpose of doctoral education is to prepare stewards of the discipline. So let's just go over that sentence again here, because that's a key sentence in the document. We maintain that the purpose of doctoral education, and I would add here cognate programs like a master's program, the purpose of such programs is to prepare stewards of the discipline. We don't know what Golde means by this yet, but I'm sure we'll find out. And if we created a ceremony that initiates and celebrates an oath that defines and embodies the values of this stewardship, we would both honour the commitment of these emerging scholars and create a touchstone to guide them through the rigours and challenges they will face along the way. Now you can see there that she's using the same language that she used above to call back the idea for you, the reader. She's making it easy for you to remember what the kind of themes that she spoke about before by using similar language. It's clever writing. But the point that she's making is we don't have a way of getting research students, master's students, PhD students, to think about the meaning of their work, and we ought to. At Carnegie, we have defined stewardship. So here it is. Here's what she means about stewardship. We've defined stewardship as encompassing a set of roles and skills, as well as a set of principles. The former, that is the roles and skills, ensures competence, and the latter, that is the set of principles, provides the moral compass. A PhD holder should be capable of generating new knowledge and defending knowledge claims against challenges and criticism, of conserving the most important ideas and findings that are a legacy of past and current work, and of transforming knowledge that has been generated and conserved by teaching well to a variety of audiences, including those outside formal classrooms. That's an interesting idea as well, that as a researcher, part of your responsibility is to be a teacher all the time. It's one of the things that I say is that all research is teaching. If you're writing an article, you're effectively teaching your colleagues how to think better about the world. That's your goal in writing the article. You're trying to help your colleagues. There, I think Golde is speaking about the same kinds of things, that in transforming knowledge, we always want to try and transform our knowledge so that it reaches the audiences who could benefit from it best. Excuse me while I have a cup of coffee, which I brought along for the reading. I encourage you to do the same. Lovely. All right. So, where were we? Generated and conserved by teaching well to a variety of audiences, including those outside formal classrooms. Students should understand that the PhD, at its heart, is a research degree. It signifies that the recipient is able to ask interesting and important questions. Those two things I think are vital, interesting and important. We'll develop that as we go on in Researcher Development 1. To formulate appropriate strategies for investigating these questions. That's your methods, like how are you going to chase these questions? Conduct investigations with a high degree of competence, that is, do the research well. Analyze and evaluate the results of the investigations. That is, don't just take the data. There's often, you'll often hear a phrase like, just let the data speak for itself. Colleagues, let me underscore here right at the beginning, that is one of the most dangerous statements that we should shut down straight away. Data do not speak for themselves. We speak for data. We generate data, that is, we take measurements about of the world, and then we use those measurements to help us tell a story about the world so that others who are engaged in similar investigations can do their own investigations better because of the story we've been able to tell about data. I don't mean story in the sense of like a fable or a fairy tale. I mean translating what the collected data means for the purposes of doing thinking about the world and understanding about the world. This applies across disciplines. Where are we here? It signifies the recipient is able to ask questions, conduct investigations, evaluate the results of the investigations, and communicate the results to others to advance the field. So that's what I was talking just before about, like that sense of all research being teaching. Conservation implies understanding of the history and fundamental ideas of the discipline, but recognises that disciplinary stewards are aware of the shoulders on which they stand and must judge which ideas are worth keeping and which have outlived their usefulness, examining how their disciplines fit into the larger intellectual landscape. That means that being a steward, I think if I interpret Golde correctly there, being a steward means having a good, strong, deep understanding of the history of your own field. That is, how the history of ideas in your own field, how your own field developed theoretically and methodologically through time. But also understanding how other fields that kind of came up alongside your own similarly developed, and be able to speak across to them and help them in their own work too. Transformation speaks to the importance of representing and communicating ideas effectively and encompasses teaching in the broadest sense of the word. It also suggests that stewards must understand other disciplines, differences between disciplinary views of the world, and how to appreciate and communicate across traditional boundaries, which I suppose is developing the idea I was just talking about before. So that's a great example of a paragraph that explains a complex idea, fleshes out a complex idea that was brought up earlier. So if we just go across back up here. Here this sentence just kind of here. We maintain the purpose of doctoral education is to prepare stewards of the discipline. At that point in the reading, we didn't know what was meant. And then down here in the next paragraph, it's good writing. Golde has brought up a kind of big idea, preparing stewards of the discipline. What do you mean by that? And it spends the next paragraph explaining what that means. Let's continue. The label steward also conveys a role that transcends accomplishments and skills. It has an ethical and moral dimension. Stewards have a responsibility to apply their knowledge, skills, findings, and insights in the service of problem solving or greater understanding. Let's read that again. Stewards, she's talking about a role that transcends accomplishments and skills. So whatever skills you develop in your career, whatever accomplishments you make, that role of being a steward is above them. It goes above them. And it has a central ethical and moral dimension. And the stewards apply their knowledge, their skills, their findings, their insights in the service of problem solving or greater understanding. I'm not entirely sure what she means by that. Let's continue and see what comes out. Self-identifying as a steward implies adopting a sense of purpose that is larger than oneself. One is a steward of the discipline, not simply a manager of one's own career. There's that quote from our presentation earlier. It's a quote that we'll return to many times this semester. A steward of the discipline, not simply the manager of one's own career. You are responsible for the community of practice in synthetic chemistry, in astrophysics, in historical and philosophical inquiry, in literature studies, like wherever it is, you are a person who is responsible for maintaining that thing, that field, that discipline, that group of work. You're not just here to get a job and get a promotion. That, I think, is very important in the world of research. We want to have people who are here to create knowledge, to generate knowledge, to help us understand the world better. Not simply to get another paycheck or to get a promotion or become famous. Not that many researchers become famous, or whatever. By accepting responsibility for the care of the discipline and understanding that one has been entrusted with that care by those in the field on behalf of those in and beyond the discipline, the individual steward embraces a larger sense of purpose. The scale is temporally large, looking to the past and the future, and broad in scope, considering the entire discipline as well as intellectual neighbours. While an expectation that a student would understand the complexities of stewardship might require an oath quite a bit longer than the medical student's oath, surely an enterprise as important as the formation of scholars requires both a ceremony and a stated recognition of the understanding and commitment to service. So what Golde's saying is that it might seem a much more complex, less vocational statement of purpose than, for example, for physicians. It still should be there. Imagine an initiation at the start of the academic year in which all new doctoral students receive a 6-sided velvet tam with golden tassel. That's the hat. With golden tassel. Oh, sounds great. I want a golden tassel. One element of doctoral regalia. Although I would say, Chris Golde, that doctoral regalia varies quite a lot around the world. There's lots of different doctoral regalia. Anyway, as a symbol of their entry into the disciplinary community. That is what she's saying here is like, maybe what we should do is literally give people the uniform. Like when people become doctors, they put on the white coat. When people join the army, they put on the army uniform. When people join the police force, they put on the police force uniform. When lifeguards become lifeguards, they get into swimmers. Like, part of being, this is a kind of interesting sociological observation on Golde's part, or contention on Golde's part. Part of being that kind of person, being a researcher, is kind of wearing the garments of research. And one of the kind of symbolic garments of research is the garb of like graduation, right? That when you graduate with a bachelor's degree, there's a particular kind of garb you wear, particular gown and hat and the collar and so forth, the hood, and so forth with masters and PhD. Golde's saying, like, why don't we give that to people at the start and expect them to wear it at the start? It's not that it will suddenly magically change them, but human beings are interesting creatures who can be affected by symbolic acts like that. And maybe just that simple act would constitute a simple intervention that would help start people thinking about meaning and purpose in their research degrees. Anyway, let's read on. Imagine an initiation at the start of the academic year when people receive the regalia as a symbol of their entry into the disciplinary community. It would also echo the graduation ceremony at which their advisor will place the velvet and satin hood around their neck. So you get the uniform at the beginning, but it's not the complete uniform. You get the complete uniform when you finish the job, as it were. It would celebrate the decision to undertake the most rigorous educational experience available. It would provide an occasion to talk about the serious venture that awaits them and the responsibilities for the generation, conservation, and transformation of knowledge that they are assuming as stewards. That is the responsibilities to do generation, to do conservation, to do transformation. Remember that in Research and Development 1, Jack and I retranslate transformation as translation. We think transforming knowledge sounds a little bit odd to maybe our Australian English ears, but the translating knowledge sounds a little bit more like what we're trying to do. We're trying to carry the knowledge between kind of areas, which is what translate means. Trans, between, latus, carry. We're trying to carry knowledge between areas. But anyway, so this is you have these responsibilities of generation, conservation, and translation when you assume that role as steward. And you assume that role, our contention is, you assume that role as steward when you begin the degree, just like Golde is arguing here. If you're beginning a Master of Research or a Master of Public Health, Master of Arts, like whatever master's degree you're enrolled in, but obviously I'm speaking mostly to Master of Research students here because this unit is a core unit of the Master of Research. By beginning this degree, you are putting on that garment. You are putting on the garments of a steward and taking on those responsibilities of generation, conservation, and transformation. Over the course of their education, students' identities will be transformed from the history student to the historian, from the physics student to the physicist. This is really great. Like, I love this as as somebody who's kind of responsible for shepherding all of you through your educational experience at postgraduate level here, that means a lot to me as one of the people in charge. Like, I don't just want you to be a student. I want you to be a person who does those things. I want you to be a historian rather than a history student, an astrophysicist rather than an astrophysics student, a chemist rather than a chemistry student. And that means that you begin taking on those responsibilities that Golde talks about: generation, conservation, translation. It means taking responsibility for teaching others and for speaking to others outside of your disciplinary area, helping those others understand the world a little bit better because of the research that you've been doing or that your field has been doing. Along the way, that is our students' identity and their identities, will be assailed by challenges and doubts. Let it be kind of put straightforwardly, colleagues. This is going to be hard. There's no way about it. I mean, just from an intellectual point of view, all of you are going to be doing projects that are up against the edge of knowledge, and by definition, that's going to be hard. There's nothing more for you to know. You are going to have to be the person who finds out the next thing. And that will be very, very difficult. It has to be. That's what research is. And that process of going through that discovery and that critique and doing that history of your own field and understanding how the claims and arguments of your field or your discipline have kind of moved and flowed throughout time, so leading you to your project where you are, and the understanding that you want to develop and share with colleagues, that will be challenging. And there will be many times when you will doubt your own capacity to do that work, or when you'll doubt the value of it. When those times come, having a sense of meaning, such as Golde's talking about here, a kind of higher sense of meaning, but being a steward, that will help you get through those times. An induction ceremony that celebrates a vision of stewardship can serve as a tangible reminder of the stewards' calling, a touchstone as they accept their role as students, your role as students, as stewards. So, friends, that's the end of Chris Golde's article. What we hope is that you'll begin thinking about, well, what am I trying to do here? Yes, I'm enrolled in a Master of Research or whichever degree you're enrolled in, but and I might, yes, I want a job at the end of this, or I want to go on to a PhD program or something. But more than that, I encourage you to start thinking about, how do you want to change the world for the better because of the research work that you're doing, because of the knowledge that you might be able to produce? How do you want to help your colleagues in your field? How do you see yourself as somebody responsible for the curation of the work that's come before you in your field of research? What value do you think there is in speaking to others, of sharing the knowledge of your discipline with people from other disciplines? How could you help them think better about the world? These are big questions that we must ask continually as researchers. I agree with Golde that we want to take those three central roles, generation, conservation, and translation, very seriously as researchers, because that helps everyone do the work of finding things out about the world, about the universe. So I hope this document, this reading, and perhaps reading along with me, can help you think a little bit about that. We set this as a prime, right, to help you begin thinking about meaning and purpose in your own research work. It's not a directive; it's a primer. It's a way to get you thinking. So, go ahead and think. Make some notes. Free think some ideas onto paper or about what you think your kind of the meaning and purpose of your research work might be, currently is, and might be in the future. Think big. Where do you want to go? How do you want to help people? How do you want to benefit the world through knowledge? That login screen keeps on coming up. It's really annoying. Anyway, colleagues, thanks for watching. I hope reading along with me was helpful. We'll see you in class. Cheers.